All right, so thank you for joining us today. This is our first podcast ever, the CPA to CFO series. Our first guest for today is Rob Krolik. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. Would you give us a little bit about your background to kick things off?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a multi-time CFO, both public and private companies, all the way from back in the day being a CPA and a controller and starting out actually in an accounting firm for a number of years, all the way through getting my first CFO gig of a public company actually pretty early on in my career. Lucky enough to get that because my CFO was actually promoted to CEO, so he promoted me. And then so shopping.com, some names that you'll know, maybe shopping.com was purchased by eBay back in the mid 2005 period of time, and then moved on from there after about 4 or 5 years to Move, and then kind of most recently, if you will, as CFO of Yelp. So Yelp is a company that connects consumers to local businesses, and I took them public in 2012, joined in 2011, and then left in 2016. Now I'm just doing a variety of things, including teaching a CFO course. So kind of my career in a nutshell, but a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, and that CFO course you're teaching is part of why we're so excited to have you on the first episode here. If you want to plug that a little bit, please feel free.
Yeah, so I, after all these years of experience, 25 plus years, I took all that knowledge. I went in the library after Yelp for about 9 months and kind of, if you will, spilled my guts into some learnings and nothing, and interestingly, nothing really strategic. It's all very practical. So it goes all the way from, managing 101 and scaling the org to business systems and facilities and stock administration and FP&A and talking to a board all the way to an IPO. So it's all real practical knowledge of all the different disciplines that a CFO covers. So I'm teaching that with a lot of the VC groups. Also teaching a one-day class each semester at Wharton in San Francisco, and also expanding it. So it's kind of my opportunity to give back some knowledge. There's a lot of opportunity right now, especially in Silicon Valley and definitely on the East Coast, to get CFO positions. And there's a lot of great talent out there. There's just not a lot of great experience. So I'm trying to fill that experience gap with the knowledge I can communicate in the course.
Awesome. I love it and highly recommend it. So we'll get into it, but before we do, I want to ask some light questions to break the ice a little bit. So what was the last movie you watched or TV series you binged?
Well, the last movie I watched was actually last week. I went to the movie theaters again to watch Endgame, the Marvels movie. I'm a huge Marvels fan, and it wrapped up the series nicely for me. Not to spoil anything for anyone out there, but it was a great movie. TV series, my son just got me into Black Mirror, so I've been binge watching that.
Yes.
It's a combination of technology and wacko stuff.
Yep, I just wrapped up the new season, and it is excellent.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm not there yet. So.
Yeah, and for the next one, I'm really looking forward to all the answers I'm going to get to this one going forward. So what's the first concert you went to?
You're going to divulge my age. So first concert was in the early 80s, Genesis. So
nice.
Genesis, so there you go.
There we go. All right, and last one before we hop back into it. What's the best vacation you've ever been on?
Best vacation, the best vacation I would say would be took the family to Yellowstone. I had never been to Wyoming, and stayed in the Teton Village there and went into Yellowstone, and it was just everybody, you go to Europe, you can go to South America, you go to China, you go to various places around the world, but it's just amazing what natural beauty we have in the U.S. And it was just a kind of reminder of that. And the wildlife was incredible. So
yeah, Yellowstone is unbelievable. Totally agree. All right, well, I love that. Let's hop back into business. So I was an accountant before. I was a CPA before starting FloQast, and I'm realizing that when I was a CPA, I had a big misconception of what CFOs actually do. So can you give me a quick 2 to 3 sentence job description for the CFO?
Yeah, I would say that the CFO is really kind of in two parts, really the steward of the company from a financial architecture as well as kind of integrity and ethics person. So really the person that steers on that end, both the financials, but also make sure that it stays a steady course on the right side of ethics and integrity. And then I would also say it's multidisciplinary. So you've got, as I kind of mentioned before, you've got all the things from like accounting and FP&A to business systems, tax, facilities, and stock administration, cap tables. So you have to be kind of well versed in a wide variety of different disciplines.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And with that, let's just get hyper tactical for a second. Where does your time end up going? Like, what does a week look like for you?
Yeah, I think it really depends on whether you're private or public. My most recent experience is public, and I'd say, a large percentage of my time, probably 25, 35%, maybe even 40, was spent doing the investor relations piece of the business. Jeremy at Yelp wasn't, he wasn't as involved in that piece, so I was really the face of Wall Street. So I spent a lot of time in that. I would say, like, if you're private, really the most time that I would spend is really thinking about the scalability of the company. So how do I get it's I think of it as people, places, and systems. So how do you get the right people in place? How do you get the right processes in place, and how do you get the right systems to be able to scale? And so I think you're always thinking about that, and how can you develop your 18-month plan and really make that happen.
Okay, makes sense. And so for the next item here, I want to get a sense of what companies are looking for in CFO candidates. And I think an interesting way to think about this is if you were to hire your replacement, what would you be looking for in a replacement? And actually, since you've, transitioned out of eBay and Yelp, were you actually involved in that hiring process for your replacement?
Interestingly, I was. So
Yeah.
when I talked to the CEO at Yelp, we talked about my replacement and what it looks like. And so I actually stayed on board to help hire the next CFO. So I was involved in that. Again, I think it really comes down to, whether you're in the private world or the public world. For us, we were definitely looking for somebody that, had a lot of analysts and outside IR experience, and not necessarily like technical accounting or that type of experience. We had a great controller in place, so no need for that. I think I did, and he's still there even today. So I think it was a great pick for us. On a private basis, I think it's just kind of two pieces. I would say if you were hiring a CFO is one that can communicate well. So the CFO is often the person who has to tell complex stories very simply, and so not only to his team but also to the peer group, so the rest of the team on the executive board that reports into the CEO, and then also to the board. So whether it be obviously a board in a private company are the investors, or at least the main investors, and then if you're public, that would be effectively your investor relations piece of the pie. So the ability to tell that story well in a simple way and kind of tell what's going on in the business from a kind of financial angle. That's and then the other piece really is the multidisciplinary piece of the CFO job. So you've got a situation where you kind of have your hands on a lot of different pots, but you're not an expert at any. So I couldn't say today that I'm an expert at tax, but I know a lot about tax and can ask the right questions, I think, to get to the right answer. But having a great person that's in tax, either outside counsel, outside person that's expert at that, or inside, really makes a big difference. Same thing with facilities, same thing with stock administration, same thing with business systems, same thing with obviously the accounting, the controller. So I think having that knowledge of being multidisciplinary, but having the experts that will help you get to the right answer. So it's really it, and maybe the ultimate way to describe it is being a conductor of a symphony.
Interesting. Yeah, that notion about maybe just knowing enough to be dangerous in any given in any given topic, and then hiring experts. That idea is something that I struggled with when I was a senior accountant. Right, I'm looking up to my bosses and my CFO, and I'm thinking, well, you guys don't even know what I do on a daily basis. You don't know the details of this stuff. And then now that I've transitioned into the founder role and I'm running a team and a department, I realize I should not know everything. I hire people to know the details, and yeah, I got to know enough to be dangerous. So
exactly.
Totally agree with that. And then communication, that move from CPA where you're really buried in a lot of workbooks and working with a small team, then you make that transition to having to present in front of people, communicate, and tell those stories. That's a big challenge for a lot of people. So do you have any advice on how to get better at that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say is, talk to your boss, and really help them understand where it is that you want to go. And a lot of people have visions of grandeur, so you're going to have to, go through the process of becoming a CFO, and you can't be there overnight. You're not going to go from a senior accountant or even a GL accountant to CFO the next day. It's going to take a lot of years and to gain all that experience. But I would ask them for opportunities, like say, whatever it is that you're working on, how can you get in front of the group, maybe during a finance all hands, or even to present to the CFO, say, hey, this is a special project that I'm doing, and here's, what impact it's going to have on the company. And it makes you think about how to present. So as many opportunities as you can to get in front of people and present, even to the controller group. How do you get an opportunity to get in front of them, your peers, and talk about what it is that you're doing, and having them give you feedback. There's also like Toastmasters. I think there's other, and then if your company is able to, maybe even spend a little bit of money with an outside coach. Not only obviously from a presentation standpoint, but just from a career standpoint. So I also think at the end of the day, looking for mentors is really, really key. I think, as you go through your life, finding people that you can draw upon their experiences and learn from their mistakes is really impactful. And that was critical for me to get kind of to where I was. So you just have to be a little bit bold. You have to be asked for that help. And most people are more than willing to give it.
Yeah, and that leads right into my next question. So mentorship, and for you, who were some other CFOs you admire, and who were your mentors?
Yeah, so one of the CFOs that I really admire, and he was a great benefit to my career, was a guy by the name of Greg Santora. He was a former CFO of Intuit. He was a former controller of Apple. He was the CFO of shopping.com when I first arrived there. So longtime public company CFO, had some fantastic experience. And one of the reasons I specifically went to shopping.com is it allowed me, even though I'd been a public company CFO, it allowed me to tutelage for at least a year under somebody that had a ton of knowledge. So I almost, if you look at it from a career standpoint, I was kind of, if you will, like the pinnacle, but I actually took a step back into a VP of finance role to get the experience under Greg. And so that was really great. The other one I would say is Bob Swan, who weirdly enough today is the CEO of Intel. But before that, he was, I met him as a CFO of eBay. Before that, he was a CFO of EDS. And then even before that, if anyone remembers Webvan, he was the CEO. So so he had some great knowledge. His background was GE. And so he had been through like the audit track as well as just the financial analyst program there. And he had just a wealth of experiences. And I learned a ton from them.
Okay. That's, can you point out to any specific lessons you learned from them along the way?
Yeah, I would say that from Greg, I think integrity. Not that I didn't learn that from Bob, but there was a situation where we had to take a hit on some numbers because something wasn't correct. Um, and we got in a room with the CEO and the audit partner, and I explained what had happened and why we were in this position, and it wasn't ideal, but we had to kind of go forward. And the CEO was like, "Hey, I'd rather not book this," and turned to the partner at the of PwC and said, "I don't really want to book this. What implication would that have?" And Greg kind of put his hand on the partner's shoulder and said, "Don't answer that. What we're going to do is book this, and if we don't, I'm going to quit." So that taught me a lot about the CFO's role and the integrity and the ethics that you have to have as a CFO, and to stand up and do the right thing. And
Yeah.
that was very impactful. And Bob really was really about how to present. He had a unique, amazing way to take a very complex problem and boil it down into almost like a graphic on a slide, and to be able to walk the board through a very complex problem in a very simplified way, and I learned a ton from that. So not that I didn't learn a ton of other things from these guys, but if you wanted me to call out one thing, those are the things I'd say.
Yeah, that first story you told is awesome, and it. It reminds me, the CFO, a big part of what we talk about is being a risk mitigator, and being ethical is an incredibly important part of that. And it's not as if your CEO did anything wrong, right? They just genuinely might not know if they can book a journal entry or not, and it's the CFO's job to put his hand on the audit partner's shoulder and say, "We're not booking that," and make sure
that's exactly right.
you guys are doing. So that's awesome. That's a great story. So let's see, what skills, this is a big one. I mean, straightforward, this is what most people on the watching this want to hear. What skills do you think you need to learn to make that leap from CPA to CFO?
I think there's probably two. I think getting as much experience in the different disciplines that we kind of talked about earlier, so even facilities or business systems, or even a little bit of tax. So I would try to talk to if you're in a bigger company, talk to your tax person and just ask them a bunch of questions. Same thing, get involved in system projects, whether it be installing an accounting system or an HR system or a time management system or whatever. I just get involved in how do you go about thinking through implementing a system. Same thing with cap tables are really important. So understanding what a cap table is, when people say a cap table, what do they really mean? And then what's involved in making sure that's accurate. At the end of the day, that's super important because it's the ownership of the company. So making sure that, and now you have tools like Carta and stuff like that, but how do you put those things in place? So I think just being multidisciplinary is just so getting experiences in all these different, so if you can do some kind of rotation, or even say, hey, look, I know we don't have really any money in the bank, but can I be treasurer for the next 6 or 12 months?
Yeah.
And and manage our money. So talk to a wealth manager, a corporate wealth manager, and maybe we have $10,000 we can put into play in treasuries or something. I mean, you're not going to specifically be doing it, but at least you get some experience there. The other thing is, I would say, just on the communication side, is really try to improve yourself. How you communicate to other people, get feedback from other people. And can you present a complex idea simply, and really think about the audience and how they're coming at it. One thing I always talk about in one of my courses is modules is talking to the board, and you got to always remember they're coming in with what you last told them. It might be 3 months since you last had a conversation with them, so they're not up to speed on anything that's happened in the last 3 months. So how do you kind of reorient them to say, hey, this is what I told you last time, and here's how it's different. And so how do you communicate that is just really important. So, getting opportunities to present, I would say, is so multidisciplinary, try to get experience in other areas, If you're in a big company, that's a lot easier to do. Even if you're in a small company, it's a lot easier to do, because anytime you raise your hand and want to take on some other opportunities, more than likely, if you're good, they'll give it to you. And then the communication side is as many times as you can do to present to other people, you should do it.
Yeah, and if you're in a small high growth company, there's no shortage of work to go around, so people will love it if you raise your hand to help out. And I just want to double down on you've certainly hammered on experience is really important, trying to learn as much as you can along the way. And there's a big, in the younger millennial culture, there's wanting to get promoted and move up really quickly. But I think it's important to recognize that you can't go from GL accountant to CFO and be a great CFO. You got to work. That takes time. I mean, if you want the title, that's great, but that doesn't mean you're actually a CFO and qualified for that position. You really need to work in the trenches to actually become a CFO and be qualified to be a CFO at, for example, another company. Right. Yeah.
And I would just realize, typically if you're 21 years old, coming out of college, and maybe you go to an accounting firm or into a company, you're talking 15 plus, maybe 20 years. So how do you make those years count? And whenever you're looking at a job, I always tell people, well, look at really not the job you're wanting, but the next job that you're going to get. How is the job that you're looking at going to prepare you for the next job? And so, and also, I don't think CFO is for everyone. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about it, but there's definitely a stress level that's on that position that is not on every position. And interestingly enough, even if, like, say the CEO wants to reach for the stars and hit some numbers that are unattainable, and you help sign up for those numbers, and you as a company don't hit those numbers, the CEO founder is not going to get fired for that. You are. So it's just, there is a level of stress that you just have to think through whether you want that on your shoulders or not. I loved it. I think CFO job is a fantastic job. It's just, you got to realize what you're signing up for.
Yeah, CFOs are highly compensated for a reason, right? It's a stressful job. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of risk. The responsibility is on your shoulders. So there's a reason they make good money.
There's a reason there's a lot of retired CFOs.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been awesome. I just have one last question to wrap it up. Do you have any parting thoughts for the audience today?
Yeah, I would say, just learn as much as you can. I think the generation that's coming up is really has an amazing access to information. It's at their fingertips. And to the extent that they can, take a coding class just to learn that, or learn about autonomous vehicles, like, get outside your scope of just being an accountant. Read books, read other things, read what's going on in the world, be knowledgeable, because that also definitely helps you become a kind of a more well-rounded individual to take on the CFO role, because you're not just dealing with accounting or FP&A, you're dealing with, hey, I want to put a facility in Chicago. What's going on in Chicago that I should know about, from a safety standpoint, from a job market standpoint. So just, be somewhat thoughtful about reading, and also definitely get a network of people that you trust that can mentor you along the way. Not only mentors like experienced people, but also your peer group. So if you have a problem with implementing a system, or you have a question about accounting, you have a group of people to kind of bounce some ideas off of, so that, because if you ask a CEO or a board, they have no idea what you're really dealing with on a daily basis, to your earlier point. So, having a peer group, a network to rely upon is I think critical to your success, especially these days with so much coming at you. So, but I think nothing's not achievable. So if you put your mind to it, you'll do it. And I wish everyone out there great luck, whether they want to be a CFO or not.
All right. Well, that's great. Great parting thoughts. Thank you, Rob, so much for joining us today. Really informative stuff, and I hope everyone was able to learn from it.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Take care.